Team BDS has demolished Golden Guardians and has claimed their spot as the 8th team in play-in stage of Worlds. They are joined by 7 teams from the minor regions. Not a lot of people get to watch the minor regions as much, so let's talk about these teams. First, let's go region to region, and let's start where everyone is probably the most familiar with, the PCS. The PCS has a staple team that makes it to Worlds almost every year now, PSG Talon. On PSG Talon, Maple is back in the PCS. He is no longer in a major region. He's back in the PCS, and he is with PSG Talon, claiming the first place seed. I think this team is the better minor region teams. I think that they have solid macro that is close to the level of major region teams. Maple has looked okay. Their bot lane is really good. Wacko and Woody, they're solid in lane. Wacko, I think, actually somehow ends up making most of the team's plays, which makes me look down on this team a little bit. I think Maple and Junjia, they aren't as proactive as they could be. Woody doesn't look for enough roams in the early game to mid game. If they make it to these later game stages, Woody can find engages on these picks like Rel, these picks like Nautilus, Leona. Wacko, he's going to play what's meta for ADCs, most likely Kai'Sa, Xayah, Aphelios, whatever ends up being meta in this tournament. Maple played a lot of Jace this year, a lot of Azir. Just expect him to see a meta mid laner. Junjia has played a lot of different champions, so Junjia might be one of the ones to look for in the innovative pool here. Azzy plays, again, what's meta top lane, but leans towards these picks like the Jax, the Renekton. He definitely is a person who wants to be doing damage in these fights. He looks like a solid laner, Azzy. Maybe be a strong point for PSG going into these lanes. As much hype this team has gotten, they haven't really impressed me. There are plays where Maple and Junjia, their follow-up is just really lackluster, and what should be a couple of kills really ends with not as much as PSG could have gotten. Maple coming back, Junjia being on that EDG roster, even if he didn't get a lot of playing time, they don't really look as impressive as players of their caliber should be. I'm not expecting much out of this team, to be honest. PSG definitely looks like one of the stronger teams in the minor region, or in the play-ins. PCS being probably the historical strongest minor region, being the first place team from that region, is definitely putting them as a favorite out of this play-in stage. The second place team coming out of the PCS is the Flying Oysters. They made a crazy run starting in the losers bracket of their playoffs, winning 4 best of 5s in a row and taking PSG to game 5 in their finals. So they are a team that, while they really ramped up in this playoffs, they were almost matching PSG blow for blow in the finals. So they are a team people should be looking at as just as strong as PSG, or very close at least. This is also a team that has a decent amount of diversity through their laners. That being said, Rest has his most games on 4 different champions. It's Renekton, Cassante, Jax, Rumble. Gemini has played pretty much Maokai, Sejuani. Shun plays a decent amount of different AD carries. He has the Ziggs game in there, so he has the possibility of bringing that out. And Jimian will be playing whatever's meta, the Azir, Ahri, Jace. He has Yone games. He has a Cassante game in there. He has picks on these Nico and Annie engaged champions, not as much. Once again, though, in PCS on this team, they aren't really making a lot of macro plays early. They aren't really making these roams from Xiaoxi. They just kind of lane. Gemini looks for ganks if he can find them. Gemini actually, I think, can find a lot of opportunity. He is a very active jungler early. Shun and Xiaoxi, they just lane, try to find these advantages in lane. Rest, I would say, he did not look too hot in the finals. It could have just been the specific Cassante Jax matchup, because that is where he was falling mostly behind. As soon as they got him off of that, he was doing much better. In team fights, Rest and Jimian are very, very strong together. This team, I would definitely say to look through Rest, Gemini, and Jimian to win them games. Shun is serviceable. He definitely isn't like the perfect ADC at spacing and positioning. He isn't the safest ADC. Xiaoxi, he does hit good engages, but he also finds himself in some very strange positions and misplays quite a bit, whether it's through nerves or through whatever it could be. CFO, again, PCS should be the strongest minor region here. So next, let's talk about the VCS. Starting with the team everyone knows a little bit about, GAM Esports. Levi's back at Worlds. He's looking really good. I think he has some insane plays in the finals. He's definitely ready to come back to Worlds and try to prove something again. And GAM coming off their MSI. Some people think they got a little upset by Rainbow 7. And maybe they're looking to get a little bit of revenge, maybe to go a little bit further. Quickly just going from top to bottom on their players. Their laners seem solid. They didn't really fall behind in lane. Kiaya top lane, again just playing these meta picks. Kati in the mid lane, I think has played with Levi for a long period of his VCS career. They have really good synergy together. Slater and Palette bot lane. Palette actually, I believe, only came into this roster recently. Him and Slater are going to be the weak point for GAM against these other bot lanes. There are definitely some bot lanes that are pretty good in the play-ins here. They could get punished. As far as their champ pools go, everyone is just playing these meta picks. Nothing super special besides Levi. He has a ton of games spread on like 15 or so different champions. GAM coming in as first place from the VCS. VCS has historically been a stronger region of the minor regions as well. GAM should be on everyone's radar. The one thing about this team, watching their games, especially after watching the previous Worlds and the games from last night, VCS as a whole, their macro is a bit behind. It kind of worries me when I don't even see these early roams from the supports, when I don't see the support and jungler kind of making plays together. It's really worrying, like these teams are behind meta of how to play the game right now, and the way they are playing is definitely susceptible to falling behind to that meta. It's not like they have their own meta that's better or their own strategy that's better. It's just that they are falling behind. We'll see how they do. Team Wales, they came into the playoffs second place, lost to Team Secret, but got their revenge on Team Secret later in the losers bracket, making a run. Let's talk about Team Wales. This team, as well as GAM, for some reason, their support only has 4 games played in the regular season. So CBL came into this roster a bit late and just kind of played through playoffs. CBL, I think, is a little questionable. I see him miss these Nautilus hooks, but most of the time I just see him hitting these engages and playing off of the team's engages. This team definitely plays through Glory. Glory was the summer season MVP of the VCS, and he is definitely the team's strongest point. He has a very diverse champion pool as well. This team, they have almost all, like, their players have 2 or 3 champions where all of their games are, and then they have 1 game, 2 games, 3 games on 10 other different champions. They really like to play what's meta, but when what's meta is taken away, or when they find the opportunity, or they're not afraid to pull out these counter picks and pull out these more niche picks. That is definitely a strength of this team. Sparta is fine in lane, I think. He has almost all of his games on Renekton and Cassante, but then he has games on Yone, Rumble, Malphite, Gragas, Gwen. I think B&J is the other part of this team's strong point. B&J looks very good on these roams, these ganks. One of the junglers, besides, I guess, playing against Levi all the time would make you this way. He's where he needs to be most of the time. He's very, I think, close to Levi, a lot closer than people might think coming into this tournament. B&J and Glory together are a piece to watch out for. Artemis in team fights, he does his damage. His positioning is pretty solid. He doesn't really get caught out too much. I think this team's bot lane is pretty strong. Again, though, Team Wales has the same issue as GAM does. Their macro is just not really there. They aren't really pushing these side waves well. They don't have this good wave control. CBL isn't looking for these roams with B&J. B&J is making plays alone. As a whole, the VCS is a little bit lower than people should expect this year. Watching the games did not really inspire confidence in me. Loud Esports, coming from the CB LOL, taking first place, while they had an insanely dominant end to the summer with a 9-2 playoffs run in their 3 playoff matches. They missed first place in the regular season by 1 win, with their slow start in the season starting 0-3. Again, making a run all the way to demolishing finals. Some of their players look really good. Some of their players, I think, are very questionable. Starting with their really, really good players. Tanones is definitely a player to look out for from coming from these minor regions. Tanones has been here before. He's playing a bunch of different champions. He will play whatever he thinks is the best in the game. Tanones, he looks very good in these games. Croc is a solid jungler. He's not doing anything super exceptional. He's making ganks every now and then. He's solid, sticking to plans. He's solid. Seos seems pretty strong in finding engages, finding picks on these champions like Rakan, Alistar, Nautilus. He isn't really getting a lot of roams out in the early game. He's mostly down in lane, just laning with Root. Root, I remember him when he replaced Teddy on Janair. There was a very similar, smaller Janair effect like Teddy had. Definitely wasn't Teddy levels of effect, but he is a solid ADC. In the play-ins, he might be one of the best ADCs. I would definitely put him 1 or 2 for top ADCs in the play-ins. Loud definitely has a huge weak point in the top lane. And Robo, to be fair, in the finals, he was playing against the MVP of the summer split, Weiser. And Weiser was absolutely demolishing Robo until Croc came to help him the entire game. That is definitely a weak point. Robo cannot really stand in lane against good top laners. And there are definitely top laners in the play-ins that will force him to ask Croc for help. I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but the problem with that is in these games, when Croc went top lane, there was almost never a cross-map play made. These stronger teams they're going to start running into in play-ins, in worlds, they are going to start punishing them. When Croc shows top lane, their bot lane is going to get punished. Their mid lane is going to get punished. Something is going to happen, right? On top of that, Loud doesn't really make cross-map plays themselves either. They are super susceptible to falling behind in the early game. They could be just straight up losing plays and not getting gold anywhere else on the map. We will see. Loud, we'll have to look top lane, see how the top lane goes. When they get to the team fights, Tanone's very strong carries. You need to be able to shut this Tanone's get down in these team fights. Otherwise, he could run away with games, even if they're behind. Detonation Focus Me, first seed out of LJL. 2 5-game series against the Hawks team in the LJL. So they were super tested, but they come out on top. DFM has had a kind of weird split. Their roster changes. Utapon, a name I think a lot of Western people might know if they've been following Worlds for a while. Been the ADC coming from DFM for a long bit. He has role swap to the top lane. Milan has replaced him as ADC. Mid lane, Arya is back from his LCK debut, back into the LJL. I think going through this team, Arya does look really good. Solid laner. He has a diverse champion pool with like a Kiana game in there. Steel is really good. I think he's one of the better junglers in here. Even with like Levi and Bean J, he's definitely close to that level. He's not the sole carry like Levi is in his team. Steel is very strong. Harp is really good, and sometimes Harp is really bad. He's I don't know. Harp, he has some really good engages, has some really good picks, has some really like solid mechanical plays. At the same time, he has really bad positioning and gets caught really bad or makes a really terrible play. He just gets caught a little bit too much. He's wild though. He's the player to watch on this team. He will be making the plays that win or lose the game. Milan, he will get damage done in fights is what I want to say, but there are also times in this series in the finals where Arya hits like a 4-man engage and there is no damage to follow up on it. That's kind of where you want your AD carry to do damage, and Milan isn't really there. Utapon for someone swapping to top lane. He looks pretty solid. Has a diverse champion pool, honestly. He isn't just playing tanks. He will play picks like the Rumble and the Gnar as well. Utapon standing against these other top laners, we'll see how they go. Some of the games, they only really can play off one ability. Like, they completely just wait for Harp to hit a Nautilus hook, and that's the only engage they're willing to look for or go on. They're really one-dimensional in their gameplay about how they're going to play the game. It's pretty obvious if you just look at their drafts, what they're going to play through, how they're going to do it. Once again, this is another team in these minor regions, in the play-ins, where I'm not seeing the support really roam a lot early. I'm not seeing them get plays to get ahead early. No cross-map plays being made. They really are just like fighting Dragon, fighting Baron, and they get Baron, and the team that gets Baron can try to push to win, right? I'm not really seeing a ton of like vision control set up on the Barons. I think DFM in the past, they've been able to show that they can do big things at Worlds, like they took a game from RNG last year in the play-ins. We'll have to see if they can come in here and just lane differently and play differently and make some noise. I do not have DFM doing too well in play-ins though. Okay, so let's talk about the LLA's first seed team, Movie Star Rainbow 7. They had an incredibly dominant season into an incredibly dominant playoffs. Also going 9-2 in the playoffs. This team kind of spoiled me. They were the first matches I watched out of all the minor region teams, and I think they look really good. They are doing things I expect teams in the major regions coming into this tournament do. They are making cross-map plays. They are roaming early. They are finding dives. They are forcing these aggressive plays. They are not just going through the motions, right? They are doing these plays with goals in mind. They are all on the same page going for these plays. I think this team, if people aren't hyped on them from their MSI performance, this is their chance to prove that they are better than a minor region team, or that minor region teams are just so much better than people expected. It's up to R7 to prove that. Leon's, he is very solid roamer. He's playing these meta champions for Khan, Rel, Nautilus, Alistar. He has a bunch of one-game champions on these things like Blitzcrank, Lulu, Yumi, Leona, Amumu. Very good roaming with the team, playing with Adi. You will see him making impact wherever he goes, right? Expect him to look mid lane a lot, but he will be making impact. Seo is a solid ADC. He has a large percentage of the team's damage. He is doing the damage that he needs to. He is where he needs to be. He's probably one of the most safe and consistent ADCs out in the plans. Miru, the team will play for him to get ahead. Adi and Leon's, they will be here. They want to get this guy ahead. They want to get him moving. They want to get him out of lane so he can start making plays in other lanes. He is a lot of fun to watch. He's really good at diving into the backline too on these picks like Akali and Ari LeBlanc, looking for these little chunks in the backline. He can play a bit more front to back style as well. He is a person to watch on this team. Adi is a very good jungler. I think the play-ins, probably the most sacked role going through this video is the jungle role. Adi, again though, is towards the top of that. He is maybe not mechanically as good as the other junglers in this pool, but playing with his team, he is always in the right spots. He is always on the same page with his team. This team is always executing plans, and Adi is always at the front of executing these plans, right? So he is very good, always in the right place. And Bong in the top lane, solid laner, and really good at diving with Miru in these fights. I don't really expect Bong to fall behind too much in lane to these other top laners, but I don't expect him to stomp lane and carry games top lane. So just expect Bong to show up in the team fights. And again, this team really surprised me with how good their macro is. And the plays they're making are really smart. They aren't just going for these plays on blind luck either. You can see they establish vision control. They establish where the enemy jungler is, where the enemy support is before they look for something. And you can see they'll move together. They go for these really smart plays. This is the team I am expecting, just based on their macro level alone, to kind of dominate the other minor region teams. They just look better. They just look like they are playing the game at a higher level. We'll see how that translates. So those are the teams in the play-ins. Really quick at the end here, my ranking of them. I would go Rainbow 7, PSG, CFO, GAM, Loud, DFM, Team Wales. So we will see. Rainbow 7's getting out, boys. I want to see them. Bring them up.
Why the fuck are you making monkey noises, Pat?